Hey, what's up, guys? Welcome to the channel. 2021 is almost over, and what a year of MMA fights we had. And this video is going to be my top 5 UFC fights of 2021. And honestly, there were so many great fights this year. And I really believe that we're living in a golden age of MMA right now. It's just, there's so many high-level amazing fights coming up, and there's so many high-level amazing fights that happened in 2021. It was tough for me to narrow this down to a top 5. I have a couple honorable mentions, then I'm going to go from 5 to 1, one being my favorite fight of 2021. But before I get into my list, do me a favor, comment down below what was your favorite fight of this year and see where it ends up on my list, or if it ends up on my list at all. Plus, I'm curious, did I miss any fights that should have been on my list? So before I get into my actual list, I know that everyone looks at this differently, and there's really 3 things that I take into account when I make my list of favorite fights. One of them, it has to be a high-level fight. I know there's some exciting fights, low-level prelim guys who, are sloppy with their technique, but they have an all-out brawl. For me, I enjoy those fights, but it just can't be on my list. 2, it has to be important and relevant within the division. For me, no matter how exciting a fight may be, stylistically, crazy fight, if it doesn't matter in the grand scheme of things, for me, it's hard to enjoy as much. It's not something that gets me super excited when, neither one of these guys are going anywhere. I could still enjoy it, but not enough to put it on my list. And last but not least, it has to be somewhat competitive. And you will find that most of my fights on this list meet all 3 of those criteria. So first off, let's get into the honorable mentions. And, before I go to number 1, actually, later on in the video, I'm going to talk about what ESPN did and how grotesque that I thought it was. And I thought it was a terrible decision of ESPN. And I'm going to get to that later. I was going to use it in the honorable mention, but I'll save it for later. So honorable mention, Marvin Vettori versus Paulo Costa. What an amazing high-level fight this was. It was originally supposed to be at middleweight, which would have made it a little bit more important. It ended up taking place at light heavyweight. Back and forth, both guys landing kill shots all night, and it went to decision. It was an amazing fight. Marvin Vettori won, and to be honest, I did not expect that fight to be that good. I was excited for the fight, but it was so high level. Both guys were landing heavy shots, and what really surprised me is Marvin Vettori was just eating shots, and absolutely they were having no effect on him. I don't know how he did it. I don't know how he absorbed them. And both guys' cardio held up. So I think this was a great fight. It was worth an honorable mention. I absolutely love this fight. And I think this is one of those fights that was underrated. And for me, it probably would have been higher up, or maybe even on my top 5, had it been at middleweight and been relevant to the division. Next up, and I think this is going to be on a lot of people's list, but this just made my honorable mentions, Max Holloway versus Yair Rodriguez. This was a more recent fight. It happened in November. I absolutely love this fight. Max Holloway won by decision. There was so much to love about this fight. But one thing I wanted to mention is Yair Rodriguez, in my opinion, won round 1. And I think there was also an argument to be made that he won round 5, which is just insane to me. And I think sometimes fights are better when an underdog, not that people didn't think Yair had no chance, but people were highly underestimating him against a guy like Max Holloway, a former champion who some people thought he never lost to Volkanovski, to come out there and make it rather competitive. He was chewing up Holloway's legs, and there was a little bit of everything in this fight. Both guys landed nasty combinations, both guys getting beat up. I believe there was a submission attempt at one point from Max Holloway. Just an overall great fight, and super relevant and important to the featherweight division. Max Holloway wins the decisions, probably getting a trilogy fight with Alexander Volkanovski. And had Yair won that fight, there's no doubt in my mind Yair would be getting the next title shot against Alexander Volkanovski. So moving on to my actual top 5. Number 5, Shane Burgos versus Billy Quarantillo. I think this is a highly underrated fight. It gets overlooked a little bit just because Gaethje versus Chandler happened just before this fight. But this fight was crazy for all 3 rounds. And the only reason it's lower down on my list, because I really do believe this was an amazing fight, I feel like it lacked a little bit of importance for the division. I feel like both guys have a chance to make that move up to contender, but I just don't know if they're ever really going to make that move. A little bit sloppy, but still a very great fight. I enjoyed it from start to finish, and I feel like it's a vastly underrated fight. Both guys swinging heavily. Both guys hurt multiple times throughout the fight. And it was just an amazing fight. I rewatched it today. It was a great fight. Shane Burgos was chopping Billy Q's legs over and over and over again, hurting him badly. And Billy Q was just moving forward, throwing heavy shots, absorbing heavy shots. And what's crazy is just because Gaethje and Chandler happened just before this fight, it's like nobody even remembers this fight for whatever reason, even though it was a great fight. And I think it's two great prospects within the division, and I think it deserves more credit, and that's why it's number 5 on my list. Moving up my list, and it's hard for me to believe that I have only a 2-round fight on the list, but Dominick Reyes versus Yuri Prohaska, what a wow fight this was. It ended, Yuri Prohaska knocked him out with a spinning back elbow towards the end of the second round. But that 9 minutes or so, I think it was 8 minutes or so, was absolutely phenomenal. If you have not seen that fight, you have to go back and rewatch it. First round, both guys hurting each other multiple times. Yuri Prohaska just wading into danger with his hands down by his waist, throwing hard shots, busting up Dominick Reyes. Both guys hurt each other multiple times in the first round. In the second round, Dominick Reyes hurt Yuri Prohaska so badly that Yuri Prohaska shot in deep on a desperation takedown. Dominick Reyes looked like he may have the guillotine locked up. Unfortunately, unfortunately for Reyes, Yuri Prohaska slips out of it. Then there's some ground and pound. Then Dominick Reyes, and I actually did a live stream for this fight, Dominick Reyes lands a nasty up kick, and it appeared to KO Yuri Prohaska, and I think Yuri Prohaska even said in an interview since the fight, he was flash KO'd by that kick. He recovered. They get back to their feet. He throws a standing elbow, kind of misses, hits the guard of Dominick Reyes. Then out of nowhere, Dominick Reyes drops his hands a little bit to counter him, and Yuri Prohaska throws a nasty spinning back elbow and sleeps Dominick Reyes face down. Phenomenal fight while it lasted. One of my favorite fights of the year, and that's why it's number 4 on the list. Moving up, number 3 on the list. And also, before I get to number 3, number 4, Yuri versus Dominick Reyes, super relevant to the division. Yuri Prohaska is probably getting the next title shot against Glover Teixeira in 2022. And that's why also it was higher on the list than Burgos versus Billy Q. But obviously, everyone has their own reasoning for where they rank fights. Moving up the list, number 3, Justin Gaethje versus Michael Chandler from UFC 268. Lived up to the hype. Amazing fight. I think a lot of people had this number 1. And I do think it was a great fight. And there was high stakes on the line, potential title shots for both guys. I don't know if Chandler would have got it if had he won. But this fight was just amazing. It was high level. There was a little bit of brawling going there. Both guys hurt each other multiple times. Chandler was winning early in that first round. Both guys were chopping each other's legs. Gaethje drops Chandler in the second round, hurts him badly, almost finishes him. The only reason this really didn't go to number 1 for me, and this was one of my favorite fights of the year regardless, and I've watched it many times since it happened, the third round was a little bit boring. Chandler was a little bit gassed. And rather than fighting, he was kind of moving away and showboating a little bit, which kind of put me off on the fight a little bit. And it looked kind of stupid. So that's why it's number 3. But still a phenomenal fight. The first 2 rounds were some of the best rounds of MMA this year. And I love that fight that I watched it multiple times. And Justin Gaethje probably fighting Charles Oliveira for the lightweight title in 2022. So super relevant in the lightweight division. Moving up on the list, number 2, Charles Oliveira versus Michael Chandler for the vacant lightweight title at UFC 262. What an amazing fight. And one of the criteria that I didn't mention earlier in the video that makes me really enjoy a fight is momentum swings. And this fight had so many momentum swings, and it really only lasted a round and then a minute of the second round, which is crazy. This is one of my favorite fights of the year, but I even considered putting this as number 1. It was such an amazing fight. Oliveira came out, got hurt early by Chandler. They ended up on the ground. Charles Oliveira ended up having Michael Chandler's back. He was in danger. Chandler gets up, jumps up, throws Oliveira to the ground, which was the craziest, sequence I've ever seen, or close to one of the craziest sequences I ever seen. Michael Chandler fights out of the back mount, gets up, hurts Oliveira again. The momentum just swings again, almost finishes him with ground and pound. And then the round ends. Oliveira just barely survives, just laying on his back, moving around, trying not to, have the referee stop it. The referee was taking a hard look. Then he comes out in the second round and sleeps Chandler with left hands, hurts him with the left hand. Chandler tries to recover, move away from Oliveira. Oliveira just spams left hands, eventually KOs Michael Chandler to capture the belt. What an amazing fight. Had super important stakes on the line, the vacant lightweight title. and so many momentum swings. That fight was so enjoyable. One of my favorite fights to watch in 2021. So before I get to number one, let's talk about what I meant by ESPN. ESPN had Alexander Volkanovski versus Brian Ortega as their fight of the year. And I don't know how they determined that. And I had that fight in my honorable mentions because I did love that fight. But what I wanted to talk about is this had no business being the fight of the year. This fight was a majority one-sided beatdown by Alexander Volkanovski. But the reason I had it in my honorable mentions is because round 3 was without a doubt the round of the year. So many momentum swings. Brian Ortega had a nasty guillotine where Volkanovski's face and head were changing colors. Then Volkanovski was landing some ground and pound. Ortega almost got a triangle. Volkanovski gets out of it, then almost finishes him with ground and pound, and he is saved by the belt. So I loved round 3. But other than that, from what I remember, I've watched this fight multiple times. It was majority a one-sided beatdown by Alexander Volkanovski. So I think it's disturbing that it was number 1 listed on ESPN. I think people just think of that third round and think about how exciting that third round was and kind of list it a little bit higher than it should, because it definitely deserves to be mentioned just because the momentum swings in that third round. But in my opinion, it had no business even in a top 5, let alone a number 1 spot. So moving on to number 1. And I'm wondering who right now is watching this video and can guess what my number 1 pick is. But that is a fight from UFC 267. It is Petr Yan versus Cory Sandhagen. This fight had everything. This was the fight I was most looking forward to on the card. It was super high level. It was super competitive. There was momentum swings without the fight. Not as drastic as some of the others on this list, but it was an amazing high-level fight at 135 for the interim bantamweight title. But honestly, it could have been Petr Yan defending his belt had we not had that DQ situation against Aljamain Sterling earlier in the year. So high level. I mean, Sandhagen arguably took the first round. Petr Yan just getting reads all first round, comes out, starts making adjustments. He does this in every fight. Every single fight starts off a little bit slow. The Aljamain Sterling fight, first round, started off a little bit slow. The Jose Aldo fight, first round, started off a little bit slow. He make adjustments mid-fight, and he's able to just, he just looks so good. He's so crisp and so technical, and he's able to just land on guys. And this fight was spectacular. It was my favorite fight of the year. I rewatched it. It was even better than I remembered. Both guys were chopping each other's legs. Cory Sandhagen was switching stances left and right. Petr Yan was just beating up the body. There were submission attempts. There was scrambles. There was everything you could have wanted in this fight. Petr Yan landed a nasty spinning back fist and almost finished Cory Sandhagen. I think it was in the third round. And even at the end of the fight, the last 15 seconds, I think there was 2 flying knees thrown by Cory Sandhagen. I think one of them landed. And there was a spinning back heel kick by Petr Yan that landed right on Cory Sandhagen's jaw. There was a head kick earlier in the fight that hurt Cory Sandhagen. And this fight was just amazing. It was top-notch, high-level MMA, and it was truly the best versus the best. Both guys were doing very well. It was a super competitive fight, and it was super high stakes for that interim bantamweight title, which could have easily been for the undisputed bantamweight title. I absolutely love that fight, and that's why it was number 1 on my list. I can't wait to see Petr Yan versus Aljamain Sterling in 2022. I can't wait to see that rematch, get the bantamweight division sorted out. And honestly, Cory Sandhagen took that fight on short notice against Petr Yan. So I want to see Cory Sandhagen maybe get a win or two, and I would not mind seeing him get thrown back in there with Petr Yan for a rematch with a full camp, And a lot of people don't give Petr Yan enough credit. To take a fight, a short notice fight against Cory Sandhagen, when you're scheduled to fight Aljamain Sterling, look at the difference in opponent. Aljamain Sterling wants to go out there, crowd you, throw a lot of combinations, take you down, beat you up, and submit you. Cory Sandhagen is a totally different stylistic matchup. So Petr Yan should be getting more than enough credit for taking that short notice opponent change against Cory Sandhagen. But I'm so happy it happened because honestly, before the fight even happened, I preferred Petr Yan versus Cory Sandhagen over Petr Yan versus Aljamain Sterling too. And what's crazy is Cory Sandhagen, I thought he was going to have a grappling disadvantage in that fight. It did not seem that much. It was pretty even, honestly. And Petr Yan was able to ragdoll Aljamain Sterling. Aljamain Sterling has a win over Cory Sandhagen. MMA math makes absolutely no sense. But Petr Yan versus Cory Sandhagen at UFC 267 was a phenomenal fight, and I absolutely loved it. Guys, comment down below. Let me know what fights I may have missed on this list. Am I crazy with my #1 pick, or do you agree with it? Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to like the video, and I will see you in the next video.